exactly. Right, Jade, what is tip number 3, please?
So my third tip is that it is crucial that we understand the active ingredients of retrieval practice. So why I said that is because we know that retrieval practice is a massively popular strategy. I think if you look at how schools are engaging with evidence-informed practice, where they are, there'll be one of two things that are most popular: retrieval or erosion science. So retrieval is massively important because because it has such a huge impact on learning. 2, because it's got hundreds of years or 100 years of research which has proved it to be effective for long-term retention, but also because of how widespread it is now. And I think that we know in education, when things become widespread like that, there is a risk of lethal mutations, and there's a risk of retrieval practice not being implemented as effectively as possible. Where if we understand the active ingredients, and what I mean by that is those parts of the strategy that make it successful, that make it impactful, that make it most effective, and have the biggest impact on learning, when we understand those, it's easier to implement it properly and avoid those kind of lethal mutations. So should I go through what I think the active ingredients are? Is that okay?
Definitely.
So again, I've kind of cheated here because I've combined lots of tips into one tip.
That's good, that's fine.
Okay, so my first point is that we know retrieval practice is effective for all learners, and really recent research actually will help to prove that to us or to show us that. So you've got the Yang et al. 2021, I think it was, paper, where they've shown us that retrieval practice is effective for primary pupils, secondary pupils, post-secondary, for female and male learners, and across 80 academic subjects. And then we've also got Pooja Agarwal's 2021 paper, which looked at the research on retrieval practice, but just in classroom settings, and again found that there's a consistent benefit of retrieval practice on student learning. So we know that there's this big impact in all subjects for all pupils, but actually retrieval practice to me has got to look different for different pupils in different classes and in different subjects. And that sounds obvious when you think about it, because how can retrieval practice look the same in science than in maths, to English, to PE, to music, to art? Like, clearly there needs to be different things, but also to a child who's in reception, 2 in year 4, 2 in year 6, 2 in year 13. So I think we've got to be really careful that, certainly myself as a senior leader and other leaders of teaching and learning across schools, that we allow our teachers to have autonomy so that they decide what retrieval practice best looks like in their subject. So if I give you some examples from my school, in art, for example, their retrieval practice is all skills-based. So it's all practising the skills that they've learned previously. And it's all about encouraging risk and encouraging creativity, not answering 5 knowledge questions on tone or shade. It's all about practice. Same in PE, it might be that you're practising a skill that you've learned previously, even a different sport than you've learned previously. In maths, our maths department, it's all about interleaving and interleaved quizzes, because we know interleaving has a really big impact in maths, not necessarily in other subjects. In science, it's a bit of a mix of short knowledge questions, and they use online quizzing for that, but then longer questions, longer kind of exam questions. So it should look different in different subjects, is my first point. The second point is that retrieval practice must be done from long-term memory. And again, this is where teachers having an understanding of that model of memory is super important, because if you understand that what we've done is hopefully with our teaching, is put information into the long-term memory, but that we need to practice retrieving that from the long-term memory back into the working memory so that it's not forgotten. Once we understand that, we know, well, obviously then retrieval practice has to be done from long-term memory, because otherwise it's revisiting, it's not retrieval, and you're not going to get those benefits. So when we first introduced retrieval practice in our school, that was about 6 or 7 years ago now, one of the things we realised really quickly, I'd obviously done a rubbish job of introducing it, because teachers were allowing kids to use their notes straight away. Obviously it's not retrieval practice, you're using your short-term memory, or you're not using your long-term memory at all. So making sure that it's done from long-term memory, which also to me actually shows that it should be done individually first, not as a paired discussion, because if it's a paired discussion, one pupil will certainly be using less of their long-term memory than another if they're using it at all. So individually and from memory first of all. that we know the power of retrieval practice is improved with corrective feedback. So really thinking about, right, once they've done the retrieval task, how are you going to give feedback so that you are highlighting any misconceptions or confirming correct answers. That it should be spaced from initial learning, and we can look at retrieval strength and storage strength there, and that basically we need to allow some forgetting so that retrieval strength is lower to get the biggest gains in storage strength. So we don't want to retrieve information straight away. Actually, it's got to be done after a delay, and that it should be repeated. We want pupils to encounter those most crucial concepts 3 or 4 times, I suppose, so that they're really fully embedded in the long-term memory. That we've got to allow pupils to be successful, because otherwise they haven't actually done the retrieval. If you've given them 5 questions to answer and haven't answered any, or the class might have done retrieval practice, but they certainly haven't. So we might use hints or closed questions to start off with, or cues, but we've got to balance that with the need for retrieval practice to be challenging. Once we make it too easy and we give too many cues, again, we don't get the benefit of that retrieval practice, because we've given them too much help. They're not actually having to use their long-term memories. And then that it should include both factual and higher order retrieval. And this is something that we've looked at in my school over the last couple of years, because when we first introduced retrieval, it was very much seen as just for factual knowledge, where now, obviously, what we've seen is that, yeah, that will improve people's factual knowledge, but it won't improve their ability to analyse or evaluate or compare or contrast or any of those other higher order skills from memory. And so what we're moving towards, or what we have moved towards really over the last couple of years, is making sure that we're thinking about, right, we might start off with factual recall when we first retrieve a topic, but over time we need to develop that so that we are expecting pupils to answer really big questions that combine multiple parts of the course or content from memory. And that is it for my retrieval practice tips.
Right, okay, this is lovely, this, Jade. So I think the point about the higher order is really important. Certainly in math, you see that quite a problem quite often. I've done this myself, where you go a bit deeper when the kids are being taught the topic, but then when you do your retrieval, it's back to kind of procedural, shallow level stuff. So I think that's a really, really important point. So 3 questions here. You mentioned that retrieval practice needs to look different across subjects. You also alluded that it looks different across phases, different age groups. Do you have anything more to say on that? What would it look like for younger students versus older students?
Yeah, so I think, I'm a secondary school teacher, so I hope I'm not kind of doing disservice to any primary experts out there, and I'm sorry if this is wrong, but from the schools that I've worked with, I think that if you are, going all the way down to reception, it is likely to be that we're expecting a smaller amount of retrieval to be done, maybe, that you are maybe more concentrating on the factual stuff initially. That I've seen some really good stuff, and these ideas are from Emma Turner, so they are not mine, I've stolen them. She does stuff like a retrieval rocket, and they have to write things that they've remembered in their retrieval rocket, and she had a spider template as well, with like different bits of knowledge coming off the spider's legs. So I don't mean kind of different in terms of we can still ask questions, they can still do a quiz. My daughter's 9 and they do sticky knowledge quizzes, she calls them. I'm like, yeah, that's retrieval practice. So, where they are doing some questions about a topic that they've learnt previously. So I guess it's the same in terms of the basic mechanisms, but the format and the level of challenge and the level of support that you give might be different for younger pupils.
Got it. Two more questions. When do you think the best time to retrieve is? Is there a particular time in a lesson? Is it shifting it to homework? Is it weekly quizzes? Well, what works best for you in your school context?
Good question. So again, we allow our departments to decide this completely for themselves. I don't think there's a particularly best time in terms of a start of a lesson or the end of a lesson or anything like that. There is research which shows if you switch too much between retrieval and learning new content, that can hinder new learning. So I guess don't switch from it all the time. But I think that there isn't this is probably the best time. I think it just depends on your curriculum time. What the type of retrieval is probably important as well. So what we see a lot in our school is that they do factual retrieval at home, because it frees up lesson time. And then maybe they do higher order retrieval practice and lessons where, as a teacher, you're therefore more involved and can give the support to get those really high quality answers. So, I mean, in my subject, I only teach GCSE and A level, and we have 3 lessons a week, and one of our lessons is a retrieval lesson. So basically, they do retrieval practice for homework, and then they come in and they do a starter quiz or a starter activity, because now we're introducing higher order retrieval, so it's not always a quiz. And then we go through their retrieval practice homework, and that's kind of like the single lesson. Other departments just do it for homework, others do a starter every lesson. So I don't think there's a right time.
Perfect. And last question on this. You mentioned the best time to retrieve is at the point kids are kind of forgetting it most, to get this biggest boost in retrieval and storage strength. How much do you go into trying to schedule in retrieval opportunities? Are you so kind of, do you think, okay, I've taught this now, so in 1 week's time I'm going to ask another question, then in 4 weeks? How do you space things out and schedule in?
We didn't used to. Our retrieval used to be very much ad hoc, like, oh, I haven't done this for a while, we'll do that, or I've seen a good resource on this, so I'll use that. Actually, what we've moved to now is what we call a retrieval practice curriculum. So you basically have your retrieval practice completely planned out alongside your new taught content. And we give a guide of around about 4 weeks. I hate giving a figure, because obviously it's always completely different, but when you're trying to be practical for teachers, they do need some guidance. But then I also say that will depend on the class, the pupils, how difficult the material is, how much they've struggled with it. If it was really complex and they struggled with it, do it sooner. So we say about 4 weeks after initial learning, and then you kind of schedule it to recap over the course, I suppose, for me at GCSE, or the year if you were doing a year group 1. But yeah, I think it's one of those areas where you've got to use your professional judgment about what is going to be the point. Well, they will remember, but they won't remember it easily, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, I think for me the biggest change has been kind of scheduling in this in advance. I was very ad hoc myself, and particularly in maths. I don't know if you find this in business studies and economics. There are certain questions that are a lot easier to quiz than other things, or certain topics, I should say. So it's very easy to include a fractions question in your do now. It's not quite so easy to include like a rotations question where the kids need a grid and tracing paper and so on. So those topics, unless you schedule them in, they don't tend to be at the forefront of teachers' minds, if that makes sense.
Or it's things that I do it when I don't really like that part of the spec, so I don't. It just doesn't jump to that when I'm writing my little quiz. It just never used to jump to mine.
Exactly.
I think it's probably more regimented, and also I really like that in the same way of when you're writing your taught curriculum, your new content curriculum, it really makes you sit down and have some good discussions about what are the most important concepts, skills, knowledge in our subject that we do want to make sure that we repeat more often. What do students struggle with? So that kind of prioritisation, I guess, is a really nice process as well.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. That's brilliant.